All right. So thank you for joining in. And today, in the sixth recitation, we will be covering this table of contents, and we will be starting off with sequence models, text processing, and language models. And I will be giving you a recap about these topics since Swapnil covered it yesterday. So let's start. Yeah. Uh, so sequence models are basically models which take in input and give output in terms of sequence of data. And what I mean by sequence of data is the order, the temporal order of the data is important. If you change the order, then it is no longer the same input or the output. And sequential data can be of like multiple times for types, for example, like text, voice, or like video clips. And you can use like two statistical tools for estimation of sequence models, which are like autoregressive models and latent variable autoregressive models. But the problem is like uh, most of the time we are looking to find this, estimate this, which is probability of the input at t given the previous inputs, which is the input 1 to input t minus 1. And there is a problem with this. The thing is that as we go on in, like if the data is quite large, then the number of previous inputs goes on decreasing drastically, and then there is a lot of computation required to calculate the probability, which is why we have two solutions for it. The first solution is auto-regressive models, and what they do is you limit the data. You don't look at the whole data from the first input to the t minus one input. Instead, you decide, like for example, you only look at the previous three inputs and compute the probability and discard the rest. The second approach is latent auto-regressive models, and in this we have a hidden state. So instead of like taking all the previous data at a time, what we do is we encode that data in a hidden state, encode that information in a hidden state, and then along with that hidden state, for like if you see here, the hidden state for t minus 1 is used along with the input at t minus 1 to calculate the hidden state t, and then we can use this hidden state along with the next input to actually calculate the output. Moving on, so like
Yeah, so like just one more thing to add. So like the first case that was shown by Josh, they are more of like traditional language models like that we use in basically an normal like traditional NLP like n-gram language models. So where we like take only n minus one words basically in the past and like predict the next word like based on that. So that we basically use count like as a like we take the count of particular occurrences of a sequence as a in order to get the probability distribution there. And yeah, and the second is a different approach. I think you can continue.
so now we will look at how to process text data. So processing text data is like, for example, here we have a random two lines, and we first tokenize the data. And what I mean by tokenizing is we break the data into parts. Here we have broken the data on spaces. So each we are getting each word as a token, and these words here you see the, time, machine are all different tokens, and then we form a vocabulary out of it. Vocabulary is basically all the words in your data. And so you take a set of the tokenized words and you form a vocabulary and assign numbers to each of the words. And then you convert the data in which was initially in terms of words into numbers. And why we do it is because machines cannot read like directly words. Humans can read words, but machines can't. So we convert the text data into numerical data. And for simplicity, here we have taken the text data as just these three lines, but you can like take a data set and work on it. So
And
here, sorry.
yeah, just to clarify, so like tokenization can be done at different like types. So like there is like word level and all other types too. Yeah, I think Josh is now
Yeah,
covering.
yeah. So right now I'm covering word level tokenization, which is tokenizing the data in words. Then there we can also use character level tokenization, which is breaking the data into separate characters like E, H, E would be different tokens if we tokenize in like character level. So here, first we have like these three sentences. So we join those three sentences with a space in the middle, and then we split it into words, and then we take a set of it. So none of the words are repeated again and again. And this is the output. So we get a set of unique words in the data. Now we convert two dictionaries. One is the one dictionary maps integer to a word, and the other dictionary maps a word to an integer. So when we are inputting our data to the model, we need this word to int dictionary. And then when we get an output, we want an output as a word. So we will again map that integer to word. So for converting the word to in dictionary, we just change the key and value pairs. And so the like this is remains. So if 0 is mapped to A in this dictionary into word, then A is mapped to 0 only in word to int. So this was word level tokenization, and now we will see character level tokenization. It is the same, and but just we don't split on spaces right now. We just split it character wise. So we get a set of all the characters in our data, and we again create the int to char and char to int dictionaries in the same way. Now we'll do padding because as in neural networks, it is like easier to input a fixed uh, size of data every time. So what we will do is in our input text sentences, we will first find the length of the max length, which is the length of the largest sentence, and then we will pad the smaller sentences such that we make the length of each of those sentences the same, and we will just add white spaces at the end to make the length the same. So here we will find the maximum length, which turns out to be 15. And then we will just run a for loop and add spaces to make the length same. And here, if you can see, this white space is added in the end for padding.
Just maybe could you explain like then why we use padding? Like basically, why it doesn't work without that?
Yeah, so because neural networks take a fixed amount, like a length of data as input, so we have to pad it. Do you have anything else to add?
I think that summarizes and like in a way if you see so we pack like sequences such that like since in GPUs we perform like operations at parallel, right? So having like the particular let's say fixed size input sequence helps us like so yeah that kind of summarizes more of like why we use padding. But yeah, later when we like go for training a neural network, we'll see like there are other ways also in terms of padding as well, which basically helps you train the network efficiently and faster.
Yeah. And so with padding, then we will now make our input and target sequences. So our input, since we are considering character level tokenization for this notebook, what we will do is we will, for example, if the word is HEY, the input sequence will be H, comma E, comma Y, and the target sequence will be E, comma Y. Since since for the target sequence we are calculating the target sequence to find the loss after we run the model. So I will come to this part like why we are making the input and character sequence in this format once I code the RNN cell. So for now, like input sequence is this, and the out target sequence is just shifted by one character. So E Y space H O W and so on. and then here we are just converting it to like numbers. So H is 13, uh, which we get from this dictionary here. So H is replaced by 13 and so on. And then we like do one hot encoding. Why we do one hot encoding and why we don't like just input these to the model is because if you input these text, these numbers are generated at random while making the dictionary. So we don't want the model to learn anything from these numbers. So which is why we convert all of those data into zeros and ones only. So in this example, if you see like if we have a word as cat, it will be one hot encoded as 1000. So that initially we add zeros to as many number of words we have, and then we like if it is a cat, then one is added here. If it is a dog, then it is added here, and so on. So here I have just written two for loops. For initially, this is to fill up the vector with zeros. And in this for loops, we will just add ones to on the one hot encoded vector. Oops, sorry. Yeah, so the shape of this vector is 3, comma 14, comma 17. So 3s are batch size, which is 3 sentences for this example. 14 is our sequence length. So the sequence length is actually 15, but we take 14 like 0 to 14. And one hot encoded size is 17. And then we just convert this, like make tensors out of it from the NumPy arrays. And here, if you notice, we only, uh, yeah, so here the H was encoded as 13, right? And here, if you see, there is a 1 in the 13th position. So this is just to show you how, like, after one hot encoding, what the vector looks like. Do you have any doubts? Okay, so I'll move on to language models now. So language models basically predict the next word given the initial words, which is if you have the first input till the t input, then you predict the probability of uh, getting the x t plus 1th input. So that, like Jay mentioned before, we have n-gram language models. So n-gram here basically means that we take the n minus one previous words only for finding the next word, which is, for example, if we have a unigram model, then we just consider the students and open like only one word at a time. For bigram, we form a chunk of two words at a time. For trigram, three words at a time, and so on. And these words are always consecutive. They are not random chunk of random words. So for this sentence, if we are using a 4-gram language model, then we will take 4 minus 1, which is only three words. We will consider only three words to predict this word, and we will discard the data which was present before that. So the probability of this word, for example, W. So the probability of W appearing given the students opened their face is simply the count of students opened their W upon counts of students opened their. So uh, there is a problem here. So if we see in this example, if we consider unigrams, which is just one word at a time, the frequencies are higher, which is good. But as we move on, if we consider bigrams, trigrams, and if we increase the n, then the frequency reduces drastically. And this is an example taken from a book about time travel. So even in that book, the time traveler appears only 59 times, and if you go for 4 grams, it would be even lesser. So there is a chance that here what if our denominator becomes 0? Then we can, for example, if that phase doesn't like appear in our whole uh, train data, then that is a problem with this n-gram language models.
So like, could any of us speak and like maybe like say what might be like the solution for this, like dealing with this? Like probably if you see in this case like the text corpus that we have, so there are terms of zeros like either in numerator and denominator both ways. So like how should we deal with this? Like let's say what your approach might be. Can any of you unmute and speak? Would anyone like to go? Or okay, seeing no responses. So like basically the approach might be to add like some constant in numerator and denominator such that like it's a small constant similar to epsilon, let's say. So you add it such that like your overall probability value is not zero, or basically it's some value greater than zero. Like if you like it handles like this particular term also being zero. So here we have like prior belief of distribution that like according to us everything occurs uniformly. So we had like one to the numerator and like basically we had let's say the size of the vocabulary v. So we add v to the denominator. So like that is one sort of like smoothing this we have. But there are other ways of also dealing with this. Yeah, I think this is all what I wanted to say. Probably I just should end.
And that is one way. And the other way is if we tweak this problem slightly. I think Swapnil mentioned it yesterday as well that instead of discarding the data previously, what if we take a latent variable and in some way we encode the information of all the previous words into that latent variable, update it, and then use it in with the output with the input for the next term to predict the output. So that is what we basically do in RNNs. And before going to RNNs, I would just like to give you a recap about like neural networks without the hidden state. Hidden state is something which we will introduce in RNNs. So this is just like these two equations represent this neural network, and here we have H, which is the hidden layer, which is equal to some activation function, non-linear activation function, which is applied on the product of inputs and the weights which map the input to the hidden layer, and we add a bias term. And once we get the edge, then we can compute the output by multiplying it to weights which map the hidden layer to the output layer and adding another bias term. So RNNs are very similar to these, and in the equations part, there is only this one term which is different, which is the hidden state of the t minus one term being added to it. So the hidden term and in some way encodes the information of all the previous tokens, so we don't have to consider all tokens at the same time every time. And to give you an example of RNN, this is why we were using character level RNN. So if you have an input as machine, MACHINE, then you so for the first input would be M. Here the hidden state initially would initialize the hidden states. We could either take it zeros for the start, or we could use some different initialization for hidden states, and then we would consider that initial hidden state along with the input to get an output label, which should be A. So if we give the model input M, then it should output A in ideal case. Then if we give A, it should output C, which is the next character to be predicted. And every time the hidden layer from the previous case is used along with the present input to find the present output. And the weights, the WHH, are shared between all the hidden states. And these are the equations on which we will now code the basic RNN block. So we will just inherit everything from nn.module, and then we will. So this is very similar to coding a multi-layer perceptron. just that we have three networks right now. If you bring this bias term here in the middle, then it is like xt into wxh plus this bias term forms one network. Then this term ht minus 1 into whh forms another network with a bias of 0. And this is the third network where we don't have an activation function to apply. So we will code wxh, whh, and whq. So like I mentioned here, for wxh, we will incorporate this bias term ph, which is why we have set the bias to true here. And the input features will be the number of inputs, and output features will be the number of hidden elements. For the linear layer, for the sorry WHS layer, we will again form a linear network, and where we set the bias to false because we only have one bias term which we have incorporated with this, and there is no bias term for this. So here the number of inputs is hidden, and the number of out features is also num hidden. And for similarly for WHQ, which is this network now, so we have the bias term here, which is why bias is true. And here in this example, we are considering that the number of input elements are the same as the number of output elements, which is why the out features is also num inputs here. And then we code the forward function where we apply, we have formed the networks now, and we will just put it in these equations. And for activation, we will just take sigmoid activation. So we get an we get output as well as the hidden layer, and we provide the old hidden layer here. So if we have multiple RNN blocks, what we can do is we can take this hidden, which is output, and we can give it to the next layer.
Yeah, just one more thing to add. Like, so, Josh, can you go back to the diagram once? So here we no like the one RNN diagram. Yeah. So like in a way, if you want to think of like how RNNs are a bit different than neural networks, it's like basically you are processing sequence in a temporal order. So which is why like you are using the same like weights are shared across the time steps, like let's say. So here we want some way of like basically encoding, let's say, some information about okay whatever we have seen in the past, which is why we have introduced this hidden state, which kind of like accumulates all the information or the knowledge that we have gotten so far. It is like in a way very handy if you see like theoretically it shows that it can accumulate all the knowledge, but yeah, in practical scenarios if you see it only accumulates knowledge for nearby steps very well. For the past time steps, it is not able to like model this knowledge very well. So RNNs are like does that function like you see with like it's a similar neural network only, but yeah, it's in a timely order, temporal order processing sequences, and like which is why it's a bit different. And also the another thing is here the operations can't be parallelized. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is RNNs are generally computationally inefficient because you have to give one input at a time and then wait for the whole like all the inputs to go. So you cannot put all the inputs at the same time. Coming back to the code. So now we will initiate the model. Here we have kept num hidden as 8, but this is just a like random number and you can change and experiment with it. And I will just print the model, and here we have the model which we coded above, and we initialize the hidden state, the first hidden state. We will use the previous hidden state in all these cases, but we need an initial hidden state for the first input. So we will just initialize it with zeros for now, and the size of this initial hidden state is 3 comma 14 comma 8, which is batch size, the max length, and this is the num hidden out value. And then we have not trained the model for now, but I will just like show you one of the output. It will be this, but this doesn't have to mean anything because we have not trained it yet. This is just like RNN cell. uh, do you have any doubts in this? Okay, I'll move to vanishing and exploding gradients now. So with deep neural networks, this is a problem which many deep neural networks face. Why vanishing gradient? What I mean is like while back propagation, this is the chain rule which we get, and here all the terms are getting multiplied to each other. So if even if one term is smaller, then the if we keep multiplying that, we will get a very small value, and initially the gradients may fade away. So the gradients from far off words are like lost. And what I mean by that, like I can show you in this example. So the sentence here is the writer of the books dash. So the two possibilities here are is and are. So if we like go syntactically, the right answer should be is because it should be because of this word writer. But if we have a vanishing gradient problem, then the gradients from this writer word would not be able to reach this, and it would just predict R, looking at the nearer word, which is books. And the opposite to this problem is exploding gradients problem, where if we have a large number as gradients, then if we keep multiplying that, we get a very large gradient. So if you can see in this example, the gradient is high here. So we directly jump to this value instead. If we actually want this to happen. So one of the solutions for exploding gradients can be clipping, which is limiting the size of the gradients to a particular value. So if C is the threshold value here, if the gradients go above C, then we just consider the value as C for that. And for the vanishing gradient problem, we have like a GRUs and LSTMs because they can preserve information from data which is like far away from the predicted word as well. I think Jay will expand more on it now.
Yeah. So like if anybody has any doubts or something like before we move on further. Uh, yeah. So like I'll pause for a minute or two and then like we can start with like dealing with sort of like the complex types of RNN networks which handle this vanishing gradients issue and like also long-term dependency. Yeah. Okay. So coming back to this, so like basically RNN suffer the problem of vanishing and exploding gradients. And also if you see like in a way theoretically RNNs can like preserve the context over whole context, but in empirically it has been shown that like RNNs only capture basically context up to a certain time steps. After that it fails and like basically it is not able to preserve the information. So which is why all of this uh, these issues happen like let's say your FSC the context basically for finding out which word like should be predicted is very far away from the actual output to be generated and your FSC so like normal RNs cannot handle that sort of like long context so there are like better ways of dealing with this sort of information about long context so in a way if you see an idea so what we can do is uh, a general or trivial solution might be we have like some uh, say like the context that we run over all like steps and we preserve so it has a global context and that we use like which kind of in a way inherently represents like basically let's say the information that we have observed so far and based on that we predict something let's say so like based on some similar ideas only like this particular like more complex RNN variants were like basically uh, formed or discovered sort of. So like one is long short-term memory networks and other are gated recurrent units. So in a way both of them have like the same role. So like basically both of them were used for like dealing with vanishing gradients and like handling this long-term dependencies sort of. So they use like this concepts of gates so what we do in those gates is like we decide about okay, how much information we should like preserve or how much information we should like let it go sort of like that way. So there are like decisions based on like this particular gates which handle like okay how much like the flow of information should be from one time step to another. So yeah. So like the for fact sort of like basically that LSTMs were discovered first, like basically were invented very long before like the gated recurrent units. But yeah, like basically gated recurrent units are very similar to RNNs. So yeah, we'll start with that first. So what does gated recurrent unit does? So if you see in gated recurrent unit, so the basic idea of it is like, let's say we have like this two gates. So what in gates, what we refer is, let's say whenever we have like a new timestamp, we first decide, okay, how much information from the previous timestamp is useful and how much we should discard. And next is like basically, uh, as we see in RNNs, we pass the hidden state, right? Basically to the next timestamp, like which kind of has like information about, okay, the overall context. So here the update gate basically decides, okay, how much information like basically at particular timestamp we should add to the hidden state and like propagate it further. So these are the two gates that are there in our basic GRU network FSC. So like the operation FSA here, like so basically we have the same RNN operation here as such, like basically FSC the hidden state one that we had here, like basically to calculate. But here basically we were not having any activation further. But now FSC here we are having an activation like torch.sigmoid, and sigmoid basically determines a value between 0 and 1, like how much information to be preserved and how much we should discard of. So which is why based on the fact that we update our old hidden state. And if you see for similarly, we have like this update gate also. So in update gate, based on like the previous hidden state that we have, we decide, okay, how much of this information, let's say, we should preserve in a way, right? And based on that, like basically how much information we are preserving, we are making a decision about, okay, how much new information like we are adding, let's say for particular hidden state. So if you see here, like for the hidden state that we have, so here we are multiplying the reset gate with the previous hidden state. So it decides how much information we are discarding from the previous hidden state that we have, like, and that becomes a new hidden state like H3 tilde. And we use this particular updated hidden state and the previous hidden state, and basically we update the actual overall hidden state. And this hidden state is propagated towards the next time step. So this is a bit of like using these gates in order to control the flow of information, like, and thus indicates the element-wise operation, like basically between the reset gate and the previous state hidden, previous hidden state, like at the time step t minus 1. And if you see for implementing this, so like there are like basically three networks we need to like have. So one is like basically dealing with this particular updating the reset gate one. Next is basically the ZT, that is the update gate. And next we update, we have like this for following is the H tilde, and like fourth one is this. So here what we do is we initialize the neural network here like nn.linear. And here also, as said previously, so there is only one bias sum, so we can view like basically one network with bias and one without bias, or like with bias, zero bias. So here we initialize the same way, like WXR and WHR, sort of this and this. And we have like the number of inputs as like the size of the vocabulary, that is the 1-point encoding, and how many hidden units we should have, like sort of, which basically decides about clicking. Further propagates into the hidden layer. And we set bias to 1 for one of the network for bias true and other as bias equal to false. And similarly, we initialize the other networks as well. So if we say XZ as well and XH, and basically correspondingly the hidden states as well. And here it's the same mapping, input to hidden, hidden to hidden. So similarly, and output is nothing but just the whatever hidden state, like the size we have, we map it again to number of inputs, like the size of the vocabulary, and that basically gives us like a probability distribution. And based on that, we apply like later on softmax and all to get, okay, the what would be the word, most likely word basically given like whatever we have seen so far. So in this case also we take the previous input and the previous hidden state that we have. And what we do is first we apply the neural network like the WXR here. So like basically we apply this neural network here, and after accordingly we also apply this particular hidden state true as well. And basically we get a reset value, like basically a sigmoid. After applying sigmoid activation, we get a value between 0 and 1 sort of. So this is like the reset gate sort of like which is a value between 0 and 1. And similarly, we apply the same operations again basically to the update gate as well. So if you see like it's the same two layers, but like both of them have different objectives. So one is about how much information we should discard, and other is about like okay from the previous hidden state, and other is basically more focusing on how much of new state we should like include in the hidden state that will obtain like and will pass on to the next time step. And we then obtain the edge tilde that is like a combination of the previously like basically the hidden state multiplied by the reset gate, and also basically the input that we have like again passed to a neural network WXH, and you apply a tan H non-linearity there. And once we obtain this edge tilde, then we have like the again the next step, which is about like how much of like new hidden state that we had like form right now to like include in the overall hidden state that will pass further on. So here we do the same part, like we multiply zt with the old hidden state, and then 1 minus zt tilde with edge tilde like here. So if you say in like basically zt can have like different roles also, like you see like you can have like this as 1 minus zt here and basically this as zt, and it will alternatively learn like the reverse mapping, like basically okay how much of the uh, old hidden state we should like have preserved in a way, and pass it like and include it in the new value, like the new hidden state that will pass further on. And here at the end we have like both so output and the hidden like your hidden state that we have. So this is just showing you a single cell like, so let's say if we have like more number of hidden units in a particular layer, so we'll do this repetitively in a for loop, and we'll pass it like the hidden state repetitively here to the forward function and accumulate all the output that we have here. So here we initialize again with the same thing. So like this is the number of words in the vocabulary, and this is like the 8 units in the number of hidden units as 8. So the next part here is like we have this pass this particular input sequence and the initial hidden state to the model, and we get the output and the hidden state here again. And if you see here the shapes are like 3, 14 and 17, and here it's 3, 14 and 8. So again, if you see like this particular output is in a way like this is the number of vocabulary words, this is max sequence length that we have currently, and the number of batches. And here it's the hidden state, like basically the shape for this is number of examples like the batch size, max sequence length that we have, and the hidden units. And this is also for output that we have obtained so far. So now like if you see like in GIS, we are able to basically have some sort of like preserving of memory, sorry, preserving of information. So like we have like this decision making ability of how much information we should like keep it in a particular time step, and like basically add it to the, let's say, like overall hidden state that will pass further on. So here like for some things that are more relevant, will like their information would be added more, and like for some time steps where the information is not too relevant will be discarded and will not be like just adding more information into the actual hidden state that will pass further on. So it basically allows us to have like some sort of a decision making ability to basically decide about okay which how much amount of memory like information from each time step we should include in the hidden state and propagate it forward. And like now coming to the LSTMs. So like in LSTMs, it's the same concept, but like it's more extensive. So what I mean in this case is it has like two important things. So it has hidden states and cell state. So like basically cell state is preserved throughout, and like cell state is more of like a global information, like how much of information you are basically having like basically globally sort of, and it is uh, it is one like cell state that is preserved and the other is hidden state, and like cell state in a way decides okay it is an accumulation of all the information that we have, like basically so far we have seen the words. Hidden state is also the similar thing, but yeah, in hidden state we might like uh, basically so what can be better? I think the better way to think might be in this case is like we are increasing the network's ability to store more information. So like basically hidden state also like let's say can have like this particular information storing capacity like in preserving the long context, But if we have one more cell like which does the same job probably, then like probably we'll be having more better preservation of the context, and we'll be able to use that information further on, and like basically the network would be much better at basically handling this long-term dependencies sort of like and decision making capacity based on like this context that we have. So here like there are two terms. So like one is the memory, like that is a overall global memory that we have, and the other is hidden state. And hidden state in a way in this case is like just the output of the network as well, sort of you can think of. So here there are like importantly, if you see there are basically three gates. So one is like basically input gate, if you see. So this should be right. Sorry. So one is input gate FSA. So what input gate decides is basically, let's say, we have like particularly cell state or the candidate memory from the previous time set that we have received so far, right? Okay. So it decides, okay, how much of new information we should add to this particular cell state that we have or the candidate memory, let's say. So it's again like basically sigmoid network FSC, like network applied after sigmoid. So we are making the predictions between 0 and 1, basically, okay, how much information we are going to update, and basically in our cell state, like the current candidate cell memory like that we have, let's say particularly right now, how much of that information will add to the global cell state, like that is a T minus 1, and that will propagate further on. That is like, let's say times of T, it would be CT, like that will obtain. The next gate that we have is like the forget clear. So forget clear decides, okay, how much information, let's say from the cell state, we should remove it of. So ultimately, if we say like the forget gate and input gate are in a way like basically doing the same thing, but they are having like basically two different gates to deal with this thing. So in GRU, if we see, we are doing the same way, but it's a more efficient way of doing things, because if you see, it's just like we are taking, let's say, FT here, then we'll be taking 1 minus FT here. So it is like the same thing, but yeah, it's in a bit different, expressed in a different way, sort of like. And the other output gate again decides, okay, how much, let's say, the information output that we obtain right now, how much will pass it on like into the cell state and basically to the furthest time sets. So again, it is the same way of like basically dealing with this, but yeah, there are three different gates to make this decisions. Do anyone have any doubt? Okay, then I will move forward. And like this is a blog link with explains RSMs in more detail, but yeah, like it's definitely a good read. Like so, yeah, probably definitely check it out. In this case, also if you see, so we have like the same way as the previous GRU implementation, but here we have like an input gate, forget gate, output gate, and again we have like a cell state that we have. Yeah. So we pass this particular, we get the current cell state that is a CT tilde, and we use that thing as like to update the global cell state that we have. And if you see here, we are also updating, performing the same operation. So like passing the neural network through the corresponding weights, like the input and the old hidden state, and then taking the signal to get the input gate, output gate, and the forget gate that we have. And once we have this particular three gates, we also have another like basically cell, basically current cell state, that is a C tilde. So that is basically like taking the input gate and the, sorry, taking the inputs that we have and the old hidden state, and it is basically forming a new cell memory at particular current time step that is more relevant basically, sort of. And based on that, like we update the global cell state, that is how much information we should discard, and also like basically at the simultaneously how much of the like the current cell state that we have we should allow it to propagate into the global cell state. And for the hidden state also we do the same thing. So in output gate like that we have, okay, so how much of the hidden state, so like the cell state that we have like basically to be used for the hidden state, let's say. So it does the same job here. And then you can basically, let's say, have like this hidden state that we have obtained. You can then run it through like a fully connected layer, that is the output, and like get the output out of it. So for like basically sentiment analysis and all different tasks, it might be like one input, maybe like depending on number of classes as the input, like output size. But here, like since we are using a language modeling example, so here the outputs would be like equivalent to the vocabulary size. And here basically in this way it pass like the old hidden state and the old memory that we have, like this h3 minus 1 and c3 minus 1. And this is just same initializing the LSTM with input size as the number of vocabulary words and the hidden units as 8. And here we run the model basically like just a forward pass. We get the output hidden state and the self state that we have, like the and self state is also known as candidate memory. And we like print out the shapes and like go through it. So this is like basically the two different variants of our RNNs that are there. There are also other ways of RNNs like this that people have come over the years invented, but these are the two popular ones that are like more likely used in standard deep learning. So, yeah. So do you have any doubts or before we move on further? Could someone, can any of you like basically in chat or like unmute and say, let's say over like we have seen both of this like GRUs and LSTMs. So like in what scenarios you might use GRUs over LSTM, let's say. Like what is the advantage of GRUs over LSTMs, like based on looking at the input equation, like the equations that you have like seen of the network? Can you of you type in chat or like unmute? Okay, so no response. So like the advantage of GRUs can be, let's say, in some situations where let's say you may want faster processing and your context is not too long, like it's not dependent on like time steps very long like in the past, then probably GRUs might be better because they are faster and like have lesser operations, so they can process information faster and like give you the output, let's say. But in cases where like your long-term dependency, like the time context is very, very important, like visiting long context, then probably in that case LSTMs are better useful empirically. Although GRUs can like theoretically like we can show that GRUs basically can do the same job as LSTMs, but yeah, empirically LSTMs tend to be more useful like in that scenario. And another case, if you see, LSTMs are also better at counting sequences as well. So like if you want to like count the sequences in all different things, then probably LSTMs might be a better choice. Okay, so like what is the length of the sequence? So LSTMs are like have inherent ability of like counting sequences, where GRU doesn't have. So yeah. Okay, so going further. So now we'll implement like whatever we have seen so far, and like this will build a model, let's say RNN, and like that takes input size, output size, hidden layer, and number of layers. Like basically, let's say the hidden layers in a particular RNN network that we have. And this is more of a language modeling task. So we'll do like given some sequence like we have given, like we'll ask the model to generate the sequence further on. So for defining the model, like we are using subclassing using the NN.model, and like we are defining RNN layer as like NN search or RNN like using NN.RNN layer, and it passes input size, hidden dimension, number of layers, and batch first equal to true. So this is like with respect to PyTorch. So like they have this PyTorch has two ways of like doing with RNN. So if you don't provide batch first equal to true, then like sequence length would be the first dimension that you would have, and next it would be the batch size. But if you have batch first equal to true, then it would like have batch size as the first dimension and then sequence length. So yeah, it's either choice depending on cases, but yeah, usually batch first equal to true should be a like good convention basically. Then like yeah, in the networks you usually have that kind of sequence sorry, that kind of dimension. So like you see batch size, then basically you have like number of features and something like so. And you have like later on a fully connected layer that is like using like it's a fully connected layer using an n.linear. It just maps the hidden units, hidden dimension like size that you have to the output size. So now in forward function, what we do is we take some input x, let's say, and based on like the input x that we have. So what we do is basically we first initialize a hidden state. If you see basically nowadays in PyTorch, you don't need to do this. If you don't pass like this hidden state, it will definitely initialize for you. But like it is usually best practice to pass it like the hidden state and like so that you know what is going on in the code and all. So here we initialize hidden state. So hidden state, it's the same thing like this. If you see, so it's dot zeros, and you have like this self dot n layers. After that, batch size and the self dot hidden dimensions. So your number of layers, like yeah, definitely it is the first parameter because based on like the layers, you get like particular batch sequence like, for that layer batch size sequence, and we pass it on the hidden. Uh, we initialize the hidden state, let's say using self dot init hidden. And after that, once we get the hidden state, we pass it using RNN. So we pass the input x that we have and the hidden state that we had like this initialize. Based on that, we get like output and a hidden state again further on. And what we do in this case, like the output here, if you see, it is the size of the output will be batch size, sequence length, and the hidden dimension. So what we do is like since we are passing it into a fully connected layer, so we want it to be interdimension like basically let's say the particular batch size times the input sequence that we have, comma hidden dimension. So we kind of like change the shape of that. We pass it through a fully connected layer and move it further on like and return as output and hidden state that we have. So far any doubts or in terms of like defining this network? So if you want to use GRUs, it would be the same thing. So in GRUs, you will like do one thing like, so you will have like this particular initialization as n.gru, and like yeah, in RNNs you have the same thing like x and hidden. But if you are doing LSTMs, then probably you'll have to also initialize here again a particular what I mean like hidden and cell state. And like if you want to pass like this, then probably it should be hidden in cell like that you obtain. And like during the output, like written also, you will pass on like hidden and the cell state. Okay. So and again in this case also so far what we have seen is like we are just going from left to right in this case sequence, right? So there is also functionality, let's say in particular for language modeling, this doesn't make sense. So you want to like only look at the words that are basically being generated so far. You don't want to see the future. But let's say if there's like a task where you just want to predict the sentiment or something like that. So where you just want like to look at okay overall context, let's say, and like just predict okay what you don't want to generate it in a sequential manner. So for that task, you can use probably the bidirectional RNNs. So in bidirectional, it's the same thing. So as we move from left to right, we also move from right to left. So like we see from the end of the sequence to the start of the sequence, and like we have both our like that the leftward and the rightward hidden units. We combine them, and based on that we make the final prediction. And when we do backward propagation, the gradients are propagated left to right as well as right to left in both directions. Yeah. So, but again, that is more useful for classification related tasks. Is there any doubt? Okay, so I will use batch size equal to batch first equal to true. Okay, so if you see like this is just specifically with respect to dealing with PyTorch. So PyTorch basically has like this batch first equal to false by default. So if batch first is false, then probably like the once you pass like the particular input, like then the RNN's output would be sequence length, batch size, uh, and hidden dimension that you have, let's say. And correspondingly, if you have more layers, then it would be a number of layers that, let's say, are there. So in order to basically have like batch first size, so we have like this batch. So it deals like with it has like operations in such a way. Okay, so then like we have the sequence also. Input sequence has batch size, sequence length, hidden value. So we pass the input in this sequence like, so input shape is, let's say this, then we'll need like batch first equal to true here. But let's say if you pass the input as sequence length and then batch size, then you can like put this parameter as false. So it depends on like how you process your input, and based on that, like this particular choice would be made. So is that clear? Okay. So yeah, it depends on like how you process the input. So yeah, but generally like the standard norm is to put batch first equal to true. So which is why your batch size is first and then sequence and like that. And yeah, in input sequence you don't have hidden dimension. So yeah, ignore that hidden dimension one. So we have initialized the model. Sorry, I will initialize the model. So yeah, the input size is the same vocabulary size. Output size is also the vocabulary size. We are using 12 hidden units and one layer. So 12 using 12 hidden units is like in a way means like you're passing it 12 times or something like 12. You have like this 12 cells at time. Mm, mm. No, I think yeah, like hidden 12 hidden units is like basically the number of neurons in a particular cell are like this much. 12. So okay. Output. And here basically we use like the number of epochs as 100, learning rate as 0.01. We use cross entropy loss. So if you might have attended yesterday's lecture, so basically like in language modeling, the better way to test okay how well you are doing is like perplexity, right? But like basically if you see perplexity is nothing but 2 raised to cross entropy. So like in a way we are 2 raised to minus cross entropy, so we are basically reducing the cross entropy loss. And for language also we want like it to be lesser for low perplexity value, so intuitively it's the same thing in a way. And we are using the Adam optimizer. Okay, so for this particular thing, if you might see right now, so what we are doing is like in this case if you see currently what we are doing is like we just we have like the input sequence that is a sequence and this is same right here. Basically that is what I mean. Like we have very small sequence of 40, but let's say if we have like larger sequences, like let's say more than 1,000 and something like that. So in that case, we can only deal with let's say for some specific sequence value, and after that we'll have to like again like pick up the other sequence like from consecutive sequence and like similarly do that thing. So for that, if that was the case, then we'll do this like repetitively in like this. So where we have like over a loop over all the number of sequences also that we have in a particular uh, batch. But here, like since the sequence is just like the 14 year, which is like the actual sequence which can be processed. So yeah, we just do with this thing. So what we do here is we pass the input sequence that we have like here, and this could be done if you are like doing it on a GPU, but yeah. And for this particular target sequence, you flatten it out because if you see the output is like completely flattened in a way, right? Basically, so we have like the output as the dimension of the output is number of basically the sequence length times the output size that we have. So here also we flatten it out again so that we have the same way of like looking at sequences, and then we like do the cross entropy loss basically over it. And here we do the backward propagation and take the weight here accordingly. And during this backward propagation here, let's say this weights would be updated across time steps. So yeah. And intuitively, if you can think of this, so this would be like just a single time step. So a good way to like think of time steps would be okay, number of like sequences, let's say that I have. So I can process, let's say, particularly 32 sequence length of 32 right now as at a time, and I have like a total, let's say, data which has the sequence length of uh, one 128, let's say. So like I will have four time steps right now. So like basically I will first process first 32, after that 33 to 64, 65 to so on like that. So yeah, one time step, two times step, third, fourth, like that. So you can think of that kind of way about thinking about that in terms of the time steps that you have. And for predicting the model, so we have a model that we trained right here so far, right? We have trained here, and if you see the loss has been decreasing here. And we also have like take the input as a character. So like basically we want okay what characters we pass in, and like based on that character it will like generate the next word, next characters further on. So we basically do the same thing. We particularly first convert and map it to a integer value. After that we get the one hot encoding of it. And after getting the one hot encoding, we convert it to a torch tensor, and then we pass it to the model and get the output. And once we get the output, so output here in this case is NN.linear, like just the outputs. So it is just the logics that we have. And logics can have values where like any value, like it can be negative as well as positive. So what we do is we apply softmax in a way. So which is to normalize over all the inputs, all the values that we have in the output. And it gives us a value between 0 and 1, like the probability. And out of that, like the one, we get a probability distribution right here for the output. And based on that, like we take the for word with the character with the highest probability here, and we return the integer character mapping of that particular integer that is like basically with the highest probability. And similarly here we do the same thing. So if you see here also we do the same thing, like so, but it is doing for a particular time steps, let's say. So if you see your sequence length is like the time steps you can think of. So like basically we pass it some starting point, let's say. Based on starting point like that we have, and we want to generate okay sequence length maximum of length is. So we deduct like the length of the characters we have like somebody like provided, and like we generate it like one by one character at a time. So if you see here for H, like the model, so it will predict E. And this is evident, I think, because like if you see in most of the examples that we have seen, so like after H, E has very high likelihood, like so very high probability of occurring. So which is why it gets very high value in this case. And if you provide HP, then it would like probably give Y, so HEY. Okay. But yeah, it depends also on the corpus. So yeah, here we have very limited corpus. So yeah, based on that, it produces hey how are you, like when you pass like the word hey and like the sequence then 50. But let's say if you pass like 10, then probably it would like give the same thing again. But like if you pass more sequence length like then what we have, let's say 20, then yeah, it would like then after like it would pass generate some random word which doesn't make sense. So, yeah. So generally idle, I think way we do sequence and also in ways like whatever what kind of like sequence length would we observe in our day-to-day task like that we have, let's say on hand. So yeah, based on that we choose the sequence length. And like okay, so coming back to the question that Joe had, okay, so like how do like basically okay train this particular neural network when we have like different so like in the input type sequential data, like one example can have like let's say size sequence in 10th, and another can have like 100 as well. So there's a lot of difference in like if you pad like basically 90, so you're padding 90 like values in this case. So a good way to deal with this is what we do in this case is like when training RNN, so we sort the examples in the bucket. So based on the sequence length. So the idea is like let's say the sequences that are shorter would be accumulated together in a way, and then we randomly shuffle among them that sequence. So like then we are not having like too large paddings, and we can like do these operations in a much better way. So that is the way how we deal with like sort of this textual data. So we sort the textual data based on the sequencing, and in the idea is so the when we do particular like now extract a batch, so batch would have similar sequencing, and based on that it would perform the operation, and it is much faster. comparatively, if we have like a sequence in random order, like let's say where one is 1,000 and other is 100, something like that. So then yeah, there's a lot of this. But again, in some cases there might be like overlap between sequences. Let's say we have like 100 and other is 1,000. So yeah, in that case it would do the same thing. Another way of dealing with this is also we have like a restriction over like what kind of max sequence length will process. So we'll like from so in that case, what we do is like okay, if let's say we'll choose only like max sequence length. So like whatever we have seen after that, we'll ignore that. And let's say if a sequence length is smaller than the max sequence length, we'll pad up to it. So that way of dealing, like that is the second way of dealing with language modeling, like training RNNs or any language model that we have. Because there can be outlier, there can be one like example with let's say higher sequence, but you're trying to pick the sequence length based on the actual true distribution that you have, let's say. So what kind of sequence length do you observe more frequently? So based on that, you like make a decision about okay, I will keep this amount of sequence and I will discard everything after that. Because that one example won't make a lot of difference if you have a lot of examples like considering. So does that answer your question, Joe? Or do you have any other doubts? Okay, I think Joe is not there. So this is just an example for you to try out. So in this case, like this is a language modeling example only, but this is more like a larger training data. And like we have provided a half baked code for you to write. So I'll just go through it like okay, what you need to just do. And you have to fill in the pieces and like complete the code, like yeah. So here it's pretty straightforward, like you just need to add like this files. And after that we import some things. Yes, dictionary. So whatever we did so far, like using that, so we are now basically using class-based methods. We are using our dictionary class, so in order to maintain it, keep a track, and we add the words that we see in our vocabulary. So you have to fill in this particular code, like okay, so let's say if you see any word, what would you do if you have already seen a word, like then what would you do based on that? The other is corpus. So in this corpus, we read the particular file that we have, and based on that reading the file, we read the tokens from that file and we add it to the dictionary. And based on that dictionary that we have, then again we generate a particular integer mapping as well. And we pass that integer mapping that we have here, basically in the for dealing with the training the RNNs and all further on. So here, like it's a comments or written. So yeah, it's just way of again you need to read tokens line by line and update your dictionary based on the words that you will see. And yeah, just one more thing, like basically add end of sequence to the every line here. One more thing, like so in language modeling, what we do is so we also have like some set of like preserved tokens. So we keep it like fixed tokens. So let's just start off like sequence like end of sequence padding and the unknown token that we have. So this is like basically let's say for whatever we have seen. So during in this quiz also we had some corpus, right? So based on that, whatever words we had seen or whatever characters we had seen. So we only have mapping of those. So what we do in order to deal with like the characters that we have not seen like in the corpus so far, we have like unknown mapping or unknown embedding in a way, let's say. So for that particular like unknown word, like so the characters that are not there in the vocabulary will map it to unknown. So that is the way of one way of dealing with this. But yeah, there are nowadays much better ways. We'll go through it as well. So then after that, like these are some parameters that are there. So probably like basically try to play around with these parameters and like basically see okay how the results change and like we see okay are you doing better or are you doing worse comparatively like that. And like we can like define the corpus, load the data that we have like basically based on that we get the IDs correspondingly here in this case, and then based on that we define a language model. So here we have defined like the language model for you, but yeah, you can play around with this and also like this if you try changing on the parameters. So like we were previously using like one-hot encoding right so far, but would it be better if like let's say have this more expressive way of like uh, having this particular embedding? So let's say we map like some one-hot encoding doesn't help you like basically let's say if uh, like doesn't explain you let's say if like there are two similar words it would have the same meaning. So, but like let's say if it projected to some embedding space, then like the words intuitively it would be like okay, the words which are similar would have like the like vectors in similar direction. So the overall like the dot product between them would be higher in this way. So based on that, the idea is here. And since you are like now dealing in terms of the vector space, so then like you have much more expressive way of the like much more expressive power because the words that might be similar will have like the overall same effect in a way. Like all the sentences that also convey the same might have like overall same similar representation in way. So yeah, again you are basically first finding out the embedding for a particular input sequence that you have. Then after that, what you are doing is basically you have this hidden state right here. Currently, we have given you. So you pass it to the LSTM that you have, and like you get the output and the hidden like again states that you have hidden in cell state. After that, the output that you have, so you have the output in sequence like this. Then you basically want the output as like in the shape. So you reshape it. After that, you pass it through a fully connected layer and get the output. And you initialize the model and so on like that. So yeah, I was talking about that. So you can think of like this dealing with the sequence length as like the uh, time set sort of approach. So like let's say where you have like total size of the sequence and like you handle like okay this amount of sequence at a time. After that like you handle further on like that sort of so on. So yeah, you define the model like first you put the tensors that you have on GPUs. After that like depending on like if GPU is available and also yeah. After that based on like whatever you have so you pass it through like a model let's say uh, yeah you pass through the model and after that once you pass through the model you then again what you do is sort of calculate the loss that is the objective of how well you're doing and based on that like you backward propagate backward and after propagating backwards so we saw like okay there is an issue of like clipping and vanishing and exploding gradients too. Okay, so although RNN solves this to a certain extent, but it is still like generally a good practice to clip your parameters so that it doesn't vanish or explode too much or explode too much. So explore clip the value to a particular value. So here we have provided 0.5, but here you can play around. But generally, uh, like a value between -5 and +5 is a good choice, like generally. And yeah, like to don't go beyond that. And yeah, depending on like your parameters, it might change. But yeah, generally it's so. And yeah, you're just printing the logs. After that, again, this is more of like a evaluating part. Okay, like now, like let language model that you have feed generate the words and like basically give you some predictions based on that. So what you do in this case is let's say you pass like some file, right? So you're basically keeping a track of okay. Um, okay. So in a like the ideal way to be think this would be like okay we are creating this particular file and you always be okay like whatever you are generating okay, you're storing it in this case. So here you're initializing this particular hidden in cell states that you have, and for this particular like so like you want some starting point or like some input as like which you start like pass to the language model and then basically generates further on. So for this case like you pass some word that you have in your vocabulary and it this is like a probability distribution like all the ones. So Topshot multinomial basically gives you a particular value like index from this according to a multinomial distribution. And like if you specify number of samples one, then it will only give you one. And here you unsqueeze one because like you deal it as a batch size of one again. And then you pass like tensor to device like if available and so on. And then you'd start generating basically based on the number of samples you want. So here the number of samples is like, okay, so how much words to be sampled? As in like how many words or like how many characters you want to generate. So based on that, you basically do this thing repetitively and you pass the previous state that you have like received from the model. And here again for dealing with this, you get output. So again here you need to convert it into the uh, like probability distribution by first maybe you could do exponentiating directly or like basically taking a softmax. But yeah, in either of the ways it would help because like yeah, you just want to find out okay which value is the highest in way. And then it will like sample like a word from a multinomial distribution according to this particular input that you passed. And yeah, you basically like then like the word that you have generated, you keep that as an input and generate next one, like sort of the further one. And once you like do this particular generation, like say I map it to the according word, yeah, this all this thing is in integer forms here. And so if you receive like let's say end of the word, then you basically move to the next line. Otherwise, you continue repetitively. So I sample this and like save this file. So this is like basically what we as an example of like language modeling task in the real world experiment. And this is like on a word level. So the previous example that we saw was on a character level. There are also another like ways of dealing with this like known as subwords. So what we do in subwords, let's say we have like okay chats suppose, and let's say in my like the vocabulary I don't have chats as a word. So what we do is like based on byte per encoding there is a technique. So we compare and like we see okay we find out okay how many characters, like we split it in, let's say we have chat as a one word and we have s as another word. So that way we can split it up and like we have this particular way of representing the things. Otherwise also like one more way of like dealing with this particular uh, words is subword model. So what we do in subwords is we do this way only, but what we do is like we have this particular preservation of something. So this means like okay this particular word is incomplete and this like this indicates that there is further as well something, and this indicates there is like before as well something. And like if we see, so we represent these words individually right now, but like when we decode it, so we then combine based on this. Okay, so this is like the one which indicates that the further there is what we need to concat. So and yeah, backward. So then we combine this and like there is some output. Okay, that chats. But yeah, this is a way of like dealing with uh, sort of like the good way of dealing nowadays. Like so yeah, like most of the like language models nowadays like deal with the like tokenization as subword tokenization sort of thing. So like do you have so far any doubts? Probably like I will touch a bit upon uh, word embeddings and like yeah, then yeah, probably we can finish the recitation. And in this case also FSC. So currently also we are still not like having this particular way of okay. Um, so let's see what if I tell you like we see okay whatever you have generated in the input, let's say sound like hidden states, if you have access to look at all of the hidden state at once and you can decide on okay based on that looking at like hidden state all of hidden state at once, okay which one is relevant to the current time sort of. So that way of dealing like basically is much more helpful, and this is like where attention comes into picture. So attention allows us like gives us the ability to okay look at all this input hidden states that we have and like based on that decide okay which one is more relevant and we'll like focus more on that. And we'll probably go into the attention and transform models next week. But yeah, like this is just to give you a way of okay why this models and like why attention is useful for like why this model still what we have seen are also not like good at like which handling long-term context sort of. Yeah. So now, do you have any doubts before we jump on to word embeddings? Mm, I'll wait for a minute and like then yeah we can start with word embeddings. So, um, um, I hope the screen is visible, like the word embeddings notebook.
Yes, it is.
Mm, yeah. So yeah, let me just download the link. Okay. So what word embeddings does is like let me see if I can right now for this maybe. Mm, if you see this example that we have right now, so what word embeddings typically does is like uh, let's say this is like this in a 2D like what we have a plot right now. So but the idea of word embeddings is like in one hot encoding if you see. So we have like this discrete sequence like between 0 and 1. And in word embeddings or like what we want to do is we want to convert this discrete sequence into a continuous representation of higher dimension, let's say, and project it to some higher dimension. And like when we have like this continuous representation at higher dimension, we pass it through a neural network and all. So we can then, like, since we have this representation, like continuous representation at higher dimension that we have predicted, and now we can pass it through neural network and we can perform backpropagation and all different things. Like, so if I say neural network also, we need like basically some continuous representation, and then only we can like perform like a backward propagation and all that things like that. So that is we need some continuous representation, like the function should be differentiable. So here also it's the same idea, but in a way, this was the first into 2013 when Word2Vec was invented. So uh, when they tried this all predicting the one-hot encodings to continuous representation in high dimensional space, they found that this word embeddings also are representational in terms of semantics. So they encode some sort of meaning and like the direction also. So like the words that are similar would have like similar in meanings would have similar directions. So if we see right now, we have like this particular word embedding, let's say, but typically word embedding are 300 dimension or so on like. But for like representation purpose, we have predicted it to 2D like space. So if we see right now, so we have this king vector representation, we have this men, queen, and woman. So now if we see in this case, so king and men are very similar in a way. Like, uh, let's say if we have like king and if we have queen. So what we can do is like if we minus king, if we minus men from king, we'll have like the attributes of okay leader being a leader, let's say. And if we add it to a queen, then we'll end up we'll add it to a woman, we'll end up with queen here. So it in a way typical allows us to have like this analogies between different entities, and it also represents sort of like this properties of like okay men and king are very similar, okay, but if we'll like subtract okay the representation of the men from the king, it will have properties of leadership, and if we add women here, then it will like represent the queen. So if you see like uh, in an exact scenario, it won't be actually pointing towards the queen, but it would be very close to the queen. Like so that would based on that like sort of we pick up like the words that are closest and like and then we give it out the output that okay it is queen in a way. Yeah. So this is like the main idea of okay what is the word embedding sort of. So now we'll see like okay what does this mean. So for now like there were two word embeddings popular right, if you see like in 2013 and 2014 era, and that kind of changed like the entire way of like looking at deep learning for NLP. So there were Word2Vec and the other was Glove. So I can give you like an overview of okay what Word2Vec and Glove does. You can later on read the paper in depth. So Word2Vec, the idea was basically why don't we use neural network only to learn this representation. So if I see like pre word embeddings era, what we used to do, we would have like a particular representation layer, let's say we have, and then we have like some other task like specific network that we have. So whenever we perform a task, we used to learn like sort of representation specific to that task, and we used to do this repetitively for each of the like network that we have. But the Word2Vec or the people. So what they suggested, okay, why don't we have a neural network that just learns this representations, and we can then use the representation later on for other tasks as well. So instead of like having this task specific representations that we obtain. So here if we see like the Word2Vec, so the idea was this only like having a neural network to learn these representations of the word. So there were two models. So one is continuous bag of words and another was skip-gram. So in continuous bag of words, the idea was okay. So like in this Word2Vec, it's more of like a context-based word embedding. So which means like the words that are in similar in context would have like similar representation in the base of. Because if you say like the words that occur similar in context would have like tend to have higher dot product sort of, because they are more likely to occur when we like let's say generate something or like that. So here like the idea of this particular two models. So one is continuous bag of words and another is skip-gram. So for continuous bag of words, the idea is okay. Let's say we have some context for a particular word, and based on the context that we have, why don't we predict the center word? And the skip-gram model does the reverse. So let's say we have some center word. Why don't we predict the context around that? What would be the most likely context around that? So based on this two different like way of dealing with the same problem, we generate like these representations for the word, and then based on these representations, now like we are able to model all these analogies. So this is like the first one. Like, so if you see this particular way, so like, so if you see like banking here, so problems and your banking can have different meanings, but based on the context, we will be better able to choose, okay, which banking is it telling about. So is it like the river banking one, or like this the actual banking that we have? Like, so yeah. So this is like a particular, like there were some other tricks that were used for training the neural network much efficiently, but yeah, I think probably you can go through it later on and we can discuss more into office hours like that if you want. Um, so the other was like glove. So in glove, the idea is, okay, before like this particular word to word model that we had, we were using more of like a deep, mm, let's say we were using more of like a count statistics that we had, right? So like we are just counting the occurrence of the words, and based on that we are making some decisions about it. So what glove was basically, the idea was like, why don't we combine both like the count based methods and also the prediction based methods and use both of them like basically in a way. So the idea is here we take the ratios of the context basically in a way, word and the context. So the words that are similar in context would have higher ratios, and words that are like not similar in context, let's say, would have lower ratio in some way. So if you see like basically we take the this ratios here. So if you see like probability of k given ice, right, and basically probability of k given stream. So we have individual probabilities available here. But if we like let's say have this ratio, so based on solid or like gas or water. So if you see like the ratio is more than one, so it means like the word ice is more likely with the word solid. If the ratio is less than one, so it means like the word steam is more likely with gas. So based on this particular idea of like the ratios of the context co-occurrence probabilities, we try to model this thing. And in this thing, like one important thing to note is that like Glove doesn't use any neural network. It just uses like formulation in such a way that we're able to like a log bilinear regression model. It's a regression model which predicts like, okay, what would be the probability ratio between both of this, and let's pick, okay, if it's one greater than one, then okay, for the numerator is like similar to the actual word, and like if it's a denominator, then okay, denominator is similar to the actual word like that. But yeah, like it uses sort of some way of mathematical formulation and expressivity, which basically then enables us to express the problem as like just so this expression, like the dot product between this and like adding the biases and all. So okay. But yeah, definitely you can check it out later on. So here we'll just like look at, okay, what to visualization and the idea. So here what we do is like we import like the PCA, which we'll use to reduce the dimensions. And word vectors are typically like 50, 10, 50, 100, and 300. Here we are, I think, using 50 on, okay, we are using 100 on here. But generally, depending on like different problems, you can use different, but generally, typically, like higher the word vector is better. Like, so yeah, 300 is typically the better choice. So there are also, I think, FastSex is also one, which you should like look at later on. It was like a recent one, 2017. So here we are using Gensim to load this word vector. So they have like the small like keyed vectors. So in keyed vectors, what do? Is we call this load word to vec format. So Gensim deals with like word to vec sort of format, but Glove has a different format sort of. So what this does is like this converts the word to vec file that we have, let's say Glove file, and it loads into the word to vec format sort of internally. And based on that, if you see now, it will load, like it will take a bit of time. And if you see here, like there are this particular amount of words, so there are, I think, approximately 400,000 words basically here in the Glove vector, that Glove embeddings that have, and like each word have like 100-dimensional representation. Okay, just a minute. Well then, do any of you have any doubt? Probably. Okay, so it has loaded. So here if you see now, like if we want to ask, okay, what is the most similar word to Obama right now? So like based on the representation that we like the model that we have, like the pre-trained representation, like they're trained. So if you see now, so what does it does, like it finds, okay, Barack is very similar to Obama, and it typically should be, because If we say in most of the text that we have, like we have Barack Obama as like the word kind of. So Barack and Obama occurs like basically often like consecutively sort of based on the context of the film. And there are other words as well, and like the different like values, like this are the dot product values between the different words that are there, and this gives like the top 10 words with the highest dot product. And if I see now which are the words most similar to banana, so it is like coconut and all different other words existing. And now if I say like, okay, what is a more model dot most similar, negative equal to banana, so which means like this gives sort of the words that are not similar to banana, and like it gives the words that are 10 most dissimilar words to banana in a way. And this is like the dot product is like it calculates the one minus dot product between the words to find out okay, and then gives you the uh, value based on that. So the higher the lesser dissimilar the word, it gets the higher value of like this one minus dissimilarity basically, one minus dot product. And now if we want to find out okay analogies, so as we discussed like saw previously, okay, king, woman, and men, so we are able to model this thing here. So what are now we're doing is okay, we have like this king plus woman representation, and we subtract man representation of the men from it. It's like the embedding. So what do we end up with? So if you see now you're like model dot most similar. So it is like queen with like this particular dot product value. And there are other analogies as well you can play around. So yeah, this is like we give x1 is to x2, so y1 is to what, like sort of based on that. So if you see Japan is to Japanese, so Australia is to Australian, like that way. So it understands okay, it represents like okay mapping of country to its whatever what we call it citizen, like that way. Okay, Japan to Japanese, Australia to Australian, like that way. So next is like other representation as well, like so Australia is to beer. So like Australia, let's say, is famous for beer, then France is famous for champagne, like that, so based on the relationship. So there is also this Obama is to Clinton and Reagan is to Nixon. And there are also this ability to do like the superlative things. So like tall is to tallest and long is to longest. Like good is to fantastic, then bad is to terrible as well. Sort of, so yeah. So it is also in a way like able to do more than one things, like also compare the superlative like things as well. And this is just plotting all these word vectors that we have, let's say. So if I plot this vector now, so if we see now, so like the words that are similar, let's say, university, school, institute, and also they are in a way similar to each other. If you see like the countries, so countries are similar, like Luxembourg, Hungary, France, Germany, so they are accumulated as a similar, very similar. If I say like the assignments and class, and also like the homework related, school related activities like careers or homework and all. If I say animals, like like sort of like, so based on like different mappings we have like this one. So this was the words we had sent. This we had randomly shuffled, like sample some 50 words from that. So now if I say like yeah, we have the complete different representation, but yeah, it might depend like yeah some, because in this case also like some words that are like let's say closely related to like that might be like distinct in like three dimension like high dimension space, but if you project them to 2D space, then it might like represent like as a closely related. So yeah, again this is a bit yeah like, so 2D representations are just for visualization purpose, but yeah, it doesn't like inherently represent okay these two entities are closer. But yeah, so I think probably yeah that's it like for today. This is like I had written this blog maybe previously like a long time so back. So probably if you're interested in like maybe to read about like word embeddings, I think yeah. Other than this, Shia Lama's blog is also really good. It covers word to it, like how it functions and all. So that is also one more like blog I would suggest to check out, like to understand word to it and word embeddings in general. And then like reading the papers would be the best source. I'll stop recording. Uh, like yeah, I'll just wait for maybe a minute if anyone has any doubt. Otherwise, I will stop recording. Like yeah. So I'll stop the recording.